Now, I know there are a lot of people that were wondering, well, why did Paige ultimately choose this game to kind of go off? And I think there were two reasons why. With that being said, I think there are four players for both men's singles and women's singles that I think that we should be looking at. I think it'll probably be more of the latter, but either way, I think this is a really good pickup from the Niners. Of course, the very first one being the big game, which is Texas and Ohio State. That is this Saturday at noon. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to a brand new episode of Ball Talk with Chanel. In this episode, as always, we are going to be talking about the latest news that has happened in the last week. So, this episode will be split into four sections. In the first section, I will be covering everything that's happened in the WNBA. We are a couple of weeks away from being at the end of the regular season and starting the postseason. So I want to talk about what the playoff picture looks like as of right now, which teams have been eliminated, which teams are left, and who are the top 8 as of right now. In the next section, I want to talk about tennis. I want to first recap what's happened in the Cincinnati Open, specifically for women's singles. And then I want to talk about the U.S. Open for both men's singles and women's singles. In the next section, I want to talk about the NFL. I want to cover first the latest news that's happened from a trade that's happened that personally has shocked me to a contract negotiation that has gone from bad to worse. And then on top of that, I want to talk about a few preseason games that we should be looking at. And in the last section, I want to cover college football. We had our very first ranked college football game this past weekend. So I want to cover what has happened in that game. And then after that, I want to talk about some of the biggest matchups that are happening in college football for this weekend. So with all that being said, let's get started. So let's start with the very first section, which is the WNBA. Like I mentioned in the beginning of this episode, we are about a couple of weeks away from the end of the regular season and the start of the postseason. So let's start first with which teams have been eliminated. So as of right now, we've had 3 teams that have been eliminated. First, we've had the Chicago Sky. They were the very first team to be eliminated. Now, they have been struggling the entire season. The season just never got better for them, and I was truthfully not shocked that they were eliminated first. Now, the next 2 teams that were eliminated were the Wings and the Sun. Now, the Wings did play the Sparks on Wednesday, and the Sparks ended up winning 81-80. So that game was ultimately the deciding factor that the Wings and the Sun were officially done once the regular season ended. Now, what I want to say about that Wings versus Sparks game is that Paige had an insane game. She dropped 44 points with 4 rebounds, 3 assists, and shot 81% from the field and was perfect from 3. She looked so sharp. Her mid-game range was strong. Her threes were very efficient. Her shot selection was great. I mean, she had such a great game. Now, I know there are a lot of people that were wondering, well, why did Paige ultimately choose this game to kind of go off? And I think there were 2 reasons why. I think first reason is because of the fact that it was the determining game as to whether the Wings would officially be eliminated or not. So I think Paige just kind of said, you know what, I might as well just go off on this game. I think the bigger reason as to why she went off in this game is the second reason, and that is because she knows that the Rookie of the Year race between her and Mystics player Sonia Citron is so close that she needed a game to really make her case as to why she should be Rookie of the Year. Now, this isn't officially reported. This isn't confirmed. This is just my personal theory. Because outside of that, there really is no reason as to why Paige was going off the way she was. Now, she is such a great player, but we never saw Paige go off like that the way that she did. And so, my theory is that because the Wings already kind of knew that they were going to be eliminated, I think Paige at least looked and said, you know what, I want to at least go off and have a great game. So that way there is a legitimate case, there is a legitimate reason as to why I should be Rookie of the Year. But like I said, that's just my theory. Now, moving on to the Connecticut Sun, who I said were the other team that was officially eliminated from playoff contention. This to me never made sense, and I kind of talked about this in a previous episode. Last season, the Connecticut Sun made a great run in the playoffs. They were a top team in the league. They made a great run, And going from that to now being one of the worst performing teams in the WNBA does not make any sense to me. Now, I think one of the biggest reasons as to why this happened to the Sun is because they decided to trade their entire starting lineup from last season. They traded all 5 players, which to me does not make any sense. If you are a GM, if you are a head coach, if you are just a staff member or an executive of this organization in general, why would you trade your starting 5 and a couple of your bench players right after they had such a good season? That is just not good decision making. That is truly going against logic. That's just one of the dumbest things I think I've ever seen. And truthfully, not going to lie, the Connecticut Sun kind of deserved being in last place at this point because that was truly such a bad decision. If your team is a top team in the league, yes, they didn't make it to the finals last year. I understand that. But you saw that they had the potential. You saw how good of a team they were. You saw that they were a couple of players away from being a top team in the WNBA where they can make it to the finals. So why would you trade everybody and then bring in new players who aren't compatible with each other? I mean, I'm sorry, you're trying to make your main scorer Marina Mabrey, and I just don't think she is that person. I don't know what the Connecticut Sun were thinking, but I think they need to just gut this roster and start all over, try to find another young core to build the team around, and hopefully they can be a top team again. But at this point, I'm not shocked that they are a bad performing team this season. I'm truly not, because like I said, the decision to trade everybody truly did not make any sense. So those are the 3 teams that are officially eliminated from playoff contention. Let's look at the teams that are left. So looking at the standings as of right now, the Minnesota Lynx are still in first. They have officially clinched a playoff spot, like I mentioned in the previous episode. Right underneath the Minnesota Lynx are the Atlanta Dream, and they have been playing so good. They have won 9 of their last 11 games. They have been on an absolute run. And who has taken the 3rd spot in the standings now are Asia Wilson and the Las Vegas Aces. You heard me correctly. The Aces are now a top 3 team in the WNBA. Now, just for context, they did start out the season being as low as an 8th. They were not doing well in the beginning of the season. But then overall, they started getting better. Asia Wilson was, of course, dominating with a 30-point game that she was always having. And that allowed them to jump from 8th, which was in the beginning of the season, to being 3rd in the standings. They have had such a great regular season, especially in the second half. In their last 10 games, they have won 9 of them. They have been on a complete roll right now, and I think they are just going to continue to get better, and I do think that they are going to be a top team, a top 3 team specifically in the league. Now, right underneath them are the Phoenix Mercury, who are continuing to do very well. And then right underneath them are the New York Liberty. Now, the Liberty, as of right now, have been struggling. They have lost the majority of their games in the last 10 or 11 games. And I'm not understanding what is going on right now. I don't know if it's because they are feeling the effect of missing out on Breanna Stewart. I don't know if it's because something is happening internally within the team. I don't know what happened, because they started out by being first in the league. They were the top team in the league in the beginning of the season, and now they have dropped as low as 5th. It would be crazy if in the next couple of weeks they dropped all the way to 7th or 8th. That to me would be crazy. I don't think that would happen, but if that does happen, that would actually be insane, because the New York Liberty are a good team. They just went to the finals last season. So I'm not quite sure what's going on with them, but hopefully they are able to figure it out in the next couple of weeks before the regular season ends. Now, right underneath the Liberty are the Indiana Fever, who have reclaimed that 6th spot in the standings, and they have been doing pretty good still without Caitlin. There is no timeline as to when exactly she would return, but nevertheless, players such as Aaliyah Boston, Kelsey Mitchell, and Natasha Howard have been having such a good season. Now, it's interesting that they are still doing good despite losing out on so many players this season. Of course, now you have Sophie Cunningham, who's out for the rest of the season. You have Sid Colson, who's out. You have Erin McDonald. You, of course, have Caitlin Clark, where there is no return as to whether she'll come back or not. Like, you just have so many players that are out. And so it is really shocking and great to see the Fever still being able to perform well, even though they have been plagued with injuries this season. And right underneath them are the Seattle Storm. They have jumped from being in that 8th spot to now being in that 7th spot. And right underneath the Storm are the Golden State Valkyries, who are currently 8th. Now, what I want to say, though, is that these are the top 8 teams as of right now, where if the playoffs have started today, these are the 8 teams that would be in. But let's not forget that we still have another couple of weeks left until the regular season ends. So you still have the Sparks that are still alive, where they are 9th, and you still have the Washington Mystics that are still alive, and they are 10th. And they're only a couple of games away from the Valkyries. So it's not over. Even the Seattle Storm are not safe right now. They are only a couple of games away from each other. So we could have it where we could see the Sparks getting in and the Valkyries being out. We could have it where the Mystics could go on a run and they could jump all the way to 8th. I mean, we're just going to have to wait and see how the standings officially shake out. But all we know right now is that the only team that has clinched a playoff spot are the Minnesota Lynx, the top team in the league. Everyone else as of right now are currently not safe. So it's going to be an interesting next couple of weeks. You know it's going to be an absolute battle. And let's just see how everything shakes out. So now let's move on to the next section, which is all about tennis. So first, I want to talk about the Cincinnati Open and recap what has happened, like how I promised in last week's episode. I talked about the men's singles tournament in last week's episode, so you can go and check it out. But first player I want to focus on is Aryna Sabalenka, who was ranked number 1 overall. She first faced Emma Raducanu in round of 32, and she won in 2 sets. And then afterwards, she faced Jessica Buzas-Monero in the round of 16, and she ended up winning in 2 sets. And now I want to focus on Coco Gauff, who was ranked number 2 overall. So first in the round of 32, she faced Diana Yamstreska, and she won due to a walkover. And then in the round of 16, she faced Lucia Bronzetti, and she ended up winning in 2 sets. So she was moving on to the quarterfinals, just like Sabalenka. So now I want to look at Elena Rybakina, who was ranked number 9 overall. So first she faced Elise Mertens in the round of 32, and she ended up winning in 3 sets. And then in the round of 16, she faced Madison Keys, and she ended up winning in 3 sets. And then she moved on to the quarterfinals, where she faced number 1 ranked Aryna Sabalenka, and she ended up winning in 2 sets. So she was moving on to the semifinals. So now I want to look at Jasmine Paolini, who was ranked number 7 overall. Now, first in the round of 32, she did face Ashlyn Kruger, and she ended up winning in 2 sets. She then went on to the round of 16, where she faced Barbara Krejcikova, and she ended up winning in 2 sets. Then she went on to the quarterfinals, where she faced Coco Gauff, who, like I mentioned before, was ranked number 2 overall. And she ended up pulling the upset and winning in 3 sets. She then moved on to the semifinals, in which she was facing Veronika Kudermetova, and she ended up winning in 3 sets. So she was heading to the final. Now, the last player I do want to talk about is Iga Swiatek, who was ranked number 3 overall. First, she faced Marta Kostyuk in the round of 32, and she ended up winning due to a walkover. And then in the round of 16, she did face Sorana Trsteya, and she ended up winning in 2 sets. And then right after that, she faced Anna Kalinskaya, and she ended up winning in 2 sets. And then in the semifinals, she faced Elena Rybakina, and that's where she ended up winning in 2 sets. So in the final, we had Iga Swiatek, ranked number 3 overall, face Jasmine Paolini, who was ranked number 7 overall. And Iga ended up winning in 2 sets. Now, Iga is such a great player. We all know how she is. That's why she is a top 3 player in women's tennis. And this was a very well-deserved, very hard-earned win. Now, not to say that Paolini had a very easy road to the final, because, of course, she didn't, just from the names that I listed. But it was great seeing her in the final and really try to make a run for it. But, I mean, Iga just completely dominated against her. It was a very, very well-deserved win. Now, before we move on to the next section, I want to talk about the U.S. Open. Now, by the time this episode airs, we would have been in the middle of the first round for the U.S. Open. So with that being said, I think there are 4 players for both men's singles and women's singles that I think that we should be looking at. So, starting first with the men's singles, I think the first player that people should be looking out for is Ben Shelton. Now, he is coming off of a recent win at the National Bank Open just a couple of weeks ago. But I do think that because the US Open is one of the biggest tournaments of the year, this is the tournament in which he is going to have to prove to himself why he is a top player. This is really going to be the tournament where he is going to show the entire world exactly who he is. Now, the next player I want to look at is Taylor Fritz. Now, Taylor has been a little bit quiet in the past few tournaments. Has been a very early exit, whether it is the second round or it is the round of 32. He has always been an exit, and so, again, like I mentioned beforehand with Shelton, given that this is such a big tournament, this will be the time for Fritz to be able to really ensure that he gets the respect that he should be getting from the community. If he was to go and win the US Open, then a lot more people would be paying attention to him. But we're just going to have to wait and see. Let's see how he performs. Hopefully he would make a good run in this tournament. Now, the next player that I want to focus on is Sasha Zverev. Now, despite him making it to 3 Grand Slam titles, he has never won a title. Now, ironically, the very first title he has made it to was the US Open title back in 2020. Now, with him participating in the US Open for this year, hopefully this will be the year in which he will be able to not only make it to the final, but then he would also be able to win. And I think that's where a lot more people would have a lot more respect for him, because then he will finally have a Grand Slam title. So I think this is also a really big tournament for him, especially for his career. And now the last player that I want to focus on is, of course, Carlos Alcaraz. Now, he has been making it to finals after finals after finals for this year. He's having such a great year. Hopefully he will be able to continue on with this trajectory with a US Open win. I think he is such a phenomenal player. I think he's going to go very far in the tournament, but again, we're just going to have to wait and see. Now, moving on to the women's singles, here are the 4 players that I think we should be looking at. First player, of course, that I think we should be looking at is Iga Swiatek, who is just coming off of a Cincinnati Open title win. And so with her winning the US Open, I think it would really put an exclamation point onto her career. It would allow people to really focus on her, and it would allow people to truly respect her as the great player that she is. Now, the next player I think that we should be focused on is Aryna Sabalenka. Not only has she been an exit both in the quarterfinals and the semifinals, and even sometimes being an early exit, and given that she has been an exit for a lot of these tournaments, I think her winning the US Open will really solidify her place at being ranked number 1 overall. Now, the next player I think we should be looking at is Jasmine Paolini. Now, she is coming off of a Cincinnati Open title loss, like how I have mentioned beforehand, and I think she could use this US Open as a way of making sure that she can fight back and really ensure that she gets a Grand Slam title. I think that she is a great player. I think she's going to have a tough road ahead of her, but of course, I think she is more than capable of being able to do that. And the last player, of course, that I think we should be looking at is Coco Gauff. Now, she is a Grand Slam title winner. We see how great of a player she is, but for the past couple of tournaments, she has been an exit. Now, Coco Gauff's last win was at the French Open final against Aryna Sabalenka. Now, with her winning the US Open, I really do believe that a lot more people would be focusing on her and really put her into the category of being one of the best players in women's tennis. I think people already view her that as of right now, but with a US Open title win, with a Grand Slam title, I think that would truly put an exclamation point onto her very early career. But again, we're just going to have to wait to see what happens. Now, before I move on to the next section, I want to take a quick break and tell you to check out the description box down below, which gives you all of my social media pages. If you want to see some daily news and reactions, then you can follow my TikTok, my Instagram, my Facebook. If you want to see what a day in the life looks like for me, then you can go and follow my Snapchat. If you want to see some hot takes and just quick reactions, then you can follow my X account and my Threads account. If you're listening to this on YouTube, please be sure to give this page a 5-star rating. Please be sure to follow this page so you do not miss a single episode. And if you are watching this on YouTube, please be sure to hit the thumbs up button down below. Please be sure to subscribe to this page and be sure to turn on notifications so you do not miss a single episode. So now let's move on to the next section, which is all about the NFL. So let's start first with the latest news that has happened. So starting first with the fact that the Washington Commanders traded running back Brian Robinson Jr. to the San Francisco 49ers for a 2026 sixth round pick. Now, just looking at this from the 49ers standpoint, okay? I think, for one, it's very interesting that they picked up another running back after Christian McCaffrey is supposedly available for this season. Now, CMC has not had the greatest luck when it comes to playing for an entire season. He is extremely injury prone, and so the question of whether he is available for this season or not is always up in the air. I think the fact that the Niners picked up Robinson while putting him as a second string running back at least tells me either one or two things. Either one, the Niners have no faith in McCaffrey being healthy for this season, so they needed some sort of safety net. Or two, they want to give CMC as much rest as they possibly can so that way he doesn't have yet another season-ending injury. And so by picking up Brian Robinson, he is a good option to have when resting CMC. I think it'll probably be more of the latter, but either way, I think this is a really good pickup from the Niners. Now, looking at this from the Commanders' standpoint, I kind of did not understand why they would give him up, especially given that he did not have a bad season last season. I mean, their rushing game was part of the reason as to why they made it as far as they did. But, I mean, either way, whether it is because of injuries, whether it's because of fumbles, I mean, whatever it may be, it was a very interesting decision for the Commanders to give up on Brian Robinson Jr. Or it really could be that they don't want to pay him because they want to use that money to be able to pay Terry McLaurin, who they are still having a contract negotiations with, / McLaurin just asked for a trade out of the team. Now, Austin Eckler does have a little bit of a lower contract, same with their second string running back, which is rookie Jacory Krosky-Merritt. So maybe they want to use the money that they're saving in order to try to win back McLaurin and try to offer him more money. Whatever the case may be, this was a very, very interesting trade. And I actually do think that the Niners won this trade. I think that they have more depth onto their roster. And I think it really does make their running game that much stronger. Even if CMC just so happens to go out again for the rest of the season, I think that having Brian Robinson Jr. is a great asset to the team, and especially for someone like Brock Purdy. Now, that's the first news that has happened. The second thing that has happened is that the contract negotiations between Micah Parsons and the Dallas Cowboys is just going from bad to worse. Apparently, according to Jerry Jones, Micah Parsons' agent, David Margalita, told Jerry Jones to stick it up his ASS. And that was in regard to their new deal. So, it looks like the contract negotiations between the two parties have just gone from bad to worse. You even saw Micah in the Cowboys' last preseason game this past weekend just completely fall asleep on the table. He came in with food, he was not dressed, he was laying down, like he was just messing around to the point that you don't even think that he is one of the players on the team. Now, I think at that point, just seeing something like that tells me that Micah is completely checked out. Now, he did mention before that he does not want to be a Cowboy anymore, that he wants a trade. And so maybe that's just him just saying, I'm completely tapped out. I don't care about this team anymore. I'm just ready to be traded. Maybe that is what this reaction is. But it is crazy just to see this falling out between Parsons and the Cowboys. And just from the fact that it seems like Jerry Jones is just being difficult. And I don't know why he's trying to be difficult to his best defensive player that is on the team. I think the Cowboys losing out on Parsons is just going to be extremely hard unless they're able to pick up another edge that can do what Micah was able to do, which I doubt. So, I mean, this whole thing has been crazy, and we're just going to wait and see whether Parsons changes his mind and he's just going to stay with Dallas, or if another team is going to be able to pick him up and pay him what he is worth and what he wants. We're just going to wait and see exactly what happens. Now, before I move on to the last section, I want to talk about a couple of the preseason games that's happened this past weekend. Now, this is the last weekend of the preseason before the regular season starts. So let's just talk about a few games. Let's talk about a few players. So, First game I want to talk about happened on Friday, which was between the New England Patriots and the New York Giants, in which the Giants ended up blowing out the Patriots, winning 42-10. And so the player that I want to focus on in this game is none other than Giants quarterback Jackson Dart.